my best friend of 50 years stood before a crowd of our mutual acquaintances, raised a glass of champagne, and publicly branded me a traitor. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. I was utterly blindsided by the attack, but clutched in my hands was a gift, a secret weapon that I knew could unravel his entire charade. I should have sensed that something was deeply amiss when Harold called to confirm my attendance at his party for the third time in a single week. "Arthur, you're definitely coming, right?" he'd asked. "I need to give the caterer a final head count." His voice was stretched thin. A wire of anxiety pulled taut in a way that felt unnatural. Still, after 5 decades of an unbreakable friendship, I had grown accustomed to Harold's particular quirks. He had always been an absolute perfectionist when it came to his social events. "Of course I'm coming, Hal. I've told you twice already. I wouldn't miss your 70th for anything in the world," I replied, cradling the phone between my ear and shoulder as I carefully finished wrapping the special gift I had spent months preparing. It was something deeply meaningful, a physical object that was meant to capture our decades of shared history. It was something that would remind him of everything we had navigated together through the years. "Good," he responded, his tone clipped and dry. "I'll expect you at 7. Perhaps it was that curtness I should have paid more attention to. Normally, Harold could talk for hours on the phone, but over the past few weeks, our conversations had become increasingly brief and strained. I had chalked it up to the stress of planning the party. After all, turning 70 wasn't a small milestone, especially for a man as concerned with appearances as Harold. On the evening of the party, I put on my best navy blue suit, fastened the tie clip Harold had given me for my 60th birthday, and took a taxi to the Oakwood Country Club. The ballroom was breathtaking. Enormous floral arrangements perfumed the air. The lighting was soft and golden, and a small orchestra was playing mellow jazz standards in the corner. I was greeted at the door by Christopher, Harold's son, who embraced me with a strange, almost hesitant hug. "Glad you could make it, Arthur," he murmured, his gaze shifting away from mine. "I wouldn't have missed it for anything," I replied, scanning the room for his father. "Where's the man of the hour?" "Dad's making the rounds with some guests. He'll be surprised to see you." Christopher nervously chewed on his lower lip. "Surprised?" But he called me 3 times this week to make sure I was coming. Christopher offered a tense, fleeting smile and gestured toward a table in the distant back of the room. "Your seat is over there. Table 15. I made my way in the direction he indicated, clutching the carefully wrapped gift in my hand. As I walked, I couldn't help but notice the curious glances and hushed whispers that followed me. Old friends, people I expected would rush over to greet me, suddenly found something interesting on the ceiling or averted their eyes completely. Something was definitely terribly wrong. Table 15 was situated in the farthest, darkest corner of the ballroom, as far as possible from the main table where Harold and his family would be seated. I sat down, completely alone, and watched as the other guests mingled and laughed with animated familiarity. My name was written in elegant, looping calligraphy on the place card, but the other seats at the table remained conspicuously empty. Half an hour ticked by, and I was still sitting in solitude when I finally saw Harold make his grand entrance into the main ballroom. He looked dashing in a tailored crimson dinner jacket, his silver hair styled perfectly. The entire room rose to its feet to applaud him. Our eyes met for a fleeting second across the crowded space, and to my utter shock, he quickly looked away, as if the very sight of me was an unwelcome intrusion. Later, during dinner, other guests were finally seated at my table. They were people I barely knew, newer friends of Harold's who seemed just as uncomfortable and out of place as I felt. The conversation was forced and stilted, a collection of artificial pleasantries. No one once mentioned my long and deep friendship with the birthday boy. When the time came for toasts, Harold's wife, Georgia, stood up first. "I'd like to thank every single one of you for coming tonight to celebrate this special evening with my wonderful husband. Harold is the most loyal, honest, and genuine man I have ever had the privilege to know." I smiled faintly, agreeing with her sentiment. I knew those qualities in him better than anyone. Next, several of his friends gave short speeches, sharing fond memories. Some of them recounted stories that I was an integral part of, but my name was never spoken, as if I had been meticulously edited out of the shared histories we all knew to be true. When Harold finally stood up to thank everyone, I felt a flicker of hope warm my chest. Surely now he would acknowledge me, his oldest and dearest friend. "I want to thank all of you who are here tonight," he began. "My true friends." His voice was firm, carrying the weight of the 50 years of our shared history, our private confidences, or deepest secret. People I can trust, who would never stab me in the back or betray my confidence. His eyes scanned the room, and for the first time all night, they fixed directly on me. A cold dread snaked down my spine, because, in life, we discover who our true friends are, and we also discover who the traitors are. A heavy silence descended upon the ballroom. It felt as if everyone in the room had collectively stopped breathing. Some of you might be wondering why I invited Arthur here tonight. He pointed a finger directly at me, and in an instant, every head in the room swiveled in my direction. I thought he deserved to hear directly from me what I think about his betrayal. I could feel my face flush with a hot, burning shame. My hands began to tremble uncontrollably. For 50 years, I had considered this man my brother. I had shared everything with him, my secrets, my fears, my family. Harold's voice quivered slightly, but his eyes were as hard and unforgiving as stone. And how did he repay my loyalty? By spreading vicious lies about me, by trying to steal my friends, by speaking ill of me behind my back. I wanted to leap to my feet, to protest, to shout that none of it was true, but my body felt frozen, glued to the chair by the sheer shock of it all. "So, Arthur," he continued, raising his champagne flute in my direction, "thank you for showing me that not every friendship is built to survive the test of time. Thank you for teaching me that not everyone is worthy of our trust." The guests exchanged deeply uncomfortable glances. Some reluctantly raised their glasses in a half-hearted gesture. Others kept their hands planted firmly in their laps. "To betrayal," Harold exclaimed, taking a long, dramatic sip of his champagne. A wave of murmurs rippled through the ballroom. Someone coughed loudly. A chair scraped against the floor. I finally managed to find the strength to stand up. My legs were shaking, but I pushed myself to my feet, the carefully wrapped gift feeling like a lead weight in my hands. "Harold," I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper, "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you don't," he replied with a cold, cruel smile. "Traitors never admit what they've done." I looked around the room, at the faces of people I had known for decades. Not a single person would meet my gaze. Not one soul stood up in my defense. "I think you should leave now," Harold said, his tone making it clear that this was not a request. In that moment, something inside of me fractured. 50 years of friendship, of shared confidences and mutual support, had been utterly destroyed in a few excruciating minutes of public humiliation. "Happy birthday, Harold," I said calmly, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. I placed my gift back into the bag I'd brought. I certainly wouldn't be leaving it for him now. Not after this. I walked toward the exit, feeling hundreds of stares burning into my back. No one followed me. No one called out my name. The moment the cool night air hit my face, the tears I had been fighting so hard to contain finally began to fall. 50 years of friendship annihilated in a single night, and I didn't even understand why. A taxi arrived almost immediately. "Where to, sir?" the driver asked. I hesitated for a moment. Home? To that vast, empty house that had felt so quiet since my Frances passed away 3 years ago? The house where Harold and I had shared so many afternoons of coffee, so many laughs, so many tears. "Sir, are you all right?" the driver asked gently. I wiped away the tears with the back of my hand and straightened my shoulders. "Yes," I answered, a new sense of determination slowly beginning to replace the overwhelming pain. "I'm fine, and I know exactly where I want to go, because that vicious public humiliation would not be the end of our story. The gift I hadn't given him, the one I had poured my heart and soul into, now seemed like something entirely different. It was no longer just a birthday present. It was something far more powerful. The taxi pulled away from the country club, leaving the glittering lights and the muffled sounds of the party behind me. I sat in the back seat, clutching my bag with trembling hands, the gift still safely inside. "Madison Avenue, please," I told the driver, giving him the address of my apartment. It was the place I'd moved into after Frances died, the place where Harold had spent countless afternoons helping me sort through her belongings, assuring me that I would be okay. Or so I had thought. As the taxi navigated the quiet city streets, my mind drifted back to 1967, the year Harold and I first met. We were both young teachers fresh out of college at Lincoln High School. I taught English literature, and he taught art. We shared the same lunch period, and, more importantly, the same profound disdain for the soggy, uninspired sandwiches served in the school cafeteria. "Those can't possibly be edible," Harold had said on our first day, eyeing my sad-looking sandwich with a wrinkled nose. He then pulled an extra apple from his lunch bag and slid it across the table to me. "Here," he'd said. "At least one of us should have something fresh." That simple act of kindness was the seed from which our friendship grew. Within weeks, we were inseparable. We spent our afternoons grading papers together in the library, sharing rides home, and complaining endlessly about the school principal. By the end of that first school year, we had become each other's most trusted confidant. When Harold met Georgia 2 years later, I was the first person he called, his voice breathless with an excitement I'd never heard from him before. "Arthur, she's the one. I just know it." I was the best man at their wedding. I held his hand in the hospital waiting room through the birth of both of his children. I stood by his side at his father's funeral. And when my dear Frances got sick, Harold was there for me too. He was there for every doctor's appointment, for every grueling round of chemo, and for that final horrible day when we knew she wouldn't be coming home from the hospital. 50 years, half a century of unwavering friendship. How could he possibly call me a traitor? I whispered the question to my own reflection in the taxi window, watching the city lights blur through my tears. What could I have possibly done? The taxi stopped at a red light, and I saw my own reflection clearly. The stunned expression, the mascara from Frances's old makeup bag I'd used to touch up my graying eyebrows, now smudged beneath my eyes, the defeated slump in my shoulders. I straightened up immediately, dabbing at my eyes with a tissue from my pocket. No, I would not let Harold's cruel words break me. But what had happened? What could have possibly turned my dearest friend against me so completely and so venomously? My mind raced, sifting through our recent interactions. Everything had seemed normal, hadn't it? We'd had lunch just 3 weeks ago at our usual spot, the corner bistro. Harold had been a bit quiet, perhaps, but I had simply assumed he was preoccupied with the final details of his party. There was that book club argument last month, when we disagreed vehemently about the ending of a new novel, but that was hardly worth mentioning. We'd had much fiercer literary debates over the decades. The only truly unusual thing was, the taxi jolted to a stop. "Madison Avenue, sir," the driver announced. I paid him the fare and stepped out onto the cool sidewalk, my thoughts still churning like a turbulent sea. The only unusual thing was Harold's new friend, Evan Powell. Evan had moved into Harold's upscale neighborhood about 6 months ago. He was a wealthy widower with impressive jewelry and a habit of always talking about his powerful connections in New York society. Harold had been immediately captivated by him, clearly impressed by his stories of charity galas and sprawling summer homes in the Hamptons. "You'd love Evan," Harold had insisted. Though when he finally introduced us, it was painfully obvious that we had nothing in common. Evan had looked me up and down with a barely concealed disdain, as if he were assessing my net worth and finding me severely lacking. After that initial meeting, Harold had begun to mention him more and more frequently. "Evan says," "Evan thinks," "Evan invited me to." Had Evan somehow managed to turn Harold against me? But why? And what possible lies could he have told that would make Harold believe, after 50 years, that I had betrayed him? I unlocked my apartment door and stepped inside. The crushing silence of the empty space enveloped me immediately. No Frances whistling her favorite tune in the kitchen, no television playing softly in the background, just empty rooms filled with ghosts and memories. I set my bag down on the side table and carefully removed the wrapped gift. I knew I would need it later, but not right now. Right now, I needed answers. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts to Christopher's number. Harold's son had always been fond of me. I had been his English teacher in high school, I'd written his college recommendation letters, and I'd attended his wedding. If anyone would be willing to tell me what was truly going on, it would be Christopher. But my finger hovered over the call button. What if Christopher believed his father's accusations? What if he, too, now saw me as a traitor? My hand fell back into my lap, and the phone screen went dark. No. Before I could get answers from anyone else, I needed to understand exactly what I was being accused of. I needed to figure out what had changed so drastically, and most importantly, I needed to decide what to do with the gift that Harold had so dramatically refused, the gift that now held a power that neither of us could have possibly anticipated. Sleep eluded me that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I was haunted by the image of Harold's face, cold, accusatory, and filled with a contempt I had never seen before. I could hear his voice echoing in my mind, calling me a traitor in front of everyone we had ever known. By the time dawn broke, painting the sky in pale shades of gray and pink, I had given up on any hope of resting. I sat at my kitchen table, nursing a cup of tea that had long since gone cold. The phone rang at precisely 7:30 a.m. My heart leaped into my throat. Perhaps it was Harold calling to apologize, to explain that it had all been a terrible, nightmarish misunderstanding. But the voice on the other end was Helen, my neighbor from down the hall. "Arthur, are you all right? I've been trying to reach you since late last night." "I'm fine," I lied, my voice sounding hollow and distant, even to my own ears. "Why?" There was a hesitant pause on the other end of the line. "You haven't seen it then?" "Seen what?" "The email. Harold sent it to everyone last night, after his party." My stomach clenched into a tight, painful knot. "What email, Helen?" "Oh, Arthur," she sighed. her voice full of pity. "It's just awful. He's saying the most terrible things about you, claiming you tried to seduce Georgia, that you've been spreading rumors about his financial problems, that you betrayed his confidence about Christopher's marriage troubles." The room seemed to tilt sideways, the floor shifting beneath my feet. "That's absurd. I would never—" "I know," Helen cut in quickly, her tone firm. "Anyone who truly knows you would never believe such things. But Arthur, he sent it to everyone. All your mutual friends, the entire book club, even the church committee." I hung up the phone shortly after, my hands shaking so badly that I could barely place the receiver back in its cradle. Harold wasn't just content to humiliate me at his party. He was actively and systematically trying to destroy my reputation. My email inbox confirmed Helen's dire warning. There it was, an email sent at 11:42 p.m. after the party had ended. The subject line read, "A painful truth. To my friends," it began. "It is with deep regret that I must inform you all of a painful truth. Arthur Miller, whom many of you know as my longtime friend, has betrayed my trust in the most hurtful ways imaginable. For years, he has portrayed himself as loyal while actively undermining me behind my back. He has spread vicious lies about my financial situation. He has attempted to drive a wedge between myself and my beloved wife. Most unforgivably, he has shared deeply personal information about my son's marriage that was told to him in the strictest confidence. I confronted him with evidence of these betrayals tonight, and he could offer no defense. I am sharing this information not to engage in gossip, but to protect others from suffering similar pain. True friendship requires loyalty and honesty, qualities Arthur has proven he does not possess. With sincere regret, Harold Caldwell." I read the email 3 times, and each word struck me like a physical blow. Evidence? What evidence could he possibly have for claims that were entirely and utterly fabricated? My phone began ringing almost constantly. Some of the calls were from concerned friends, like Helen, who didn't believe a word of Harold's accusations. But others were from people simply looking for a piece of the gossip, eager to hear my side of the unfolding scandal. I let most of the calls go to voicemail. What could I possibly say? How does one even begin to defend oneself against lies so outrageous they defy all explanation? By noon, I had received another deeply disturbing call. This one was from Joan, who ran the church charity committee I had volunteered with for over a decade. "Arthur, I'm so sorry, but given the circumstances, the board feels it would be best if you stepped back from your duties for a while, at least until this situation resolves itself." "Joan, none of it is true," I pleaded, my voice cracking. "Harold is lying, though I have no idea why." "I certainly hope that's the case," Joan replied, her tone making it painfully clear that she wasn't convinced. "But we simply can't have this kind of drama associated with our work." After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence. Harold wasn't just attacking our friendship. He was systematically dismantling my entire social life, tearing down the community connections I had spent decades building. Late that afternoon, I finally worked up the courage to call Christopher. To my surprise, he answered on the second ring. "Arthur," his voice was tight and guarded. "Christopher, please, I need to understand what's happening. None of what your father is saying is true." There was a long, heavy pause. "My father showed me the letters, Arthur." "Letters? What letters?" "Don't." Christopher's voice hardened. "Just don't. The letters you wrote to my mother. Dad found them in her desk last month." The world seemed to stop spinning. "Christopher, I have never in my life written a letter to your mother. Never. They're in your handwriting," he said flatly. from 3 years ago while Dad was visiting his Uncle Sam in Florida, suggesting that you and she, he couldn't bring himself to finish the sentence. Christopher, that's impossible. My voice was shaking now. Someone must have forged them. You know I would never do something like that. I don't know what to believe anymore. He cut in, his voice filled with a weary confusion. But I do know that those letters exist, and my mother isn't denying them. The call ended soon after, leaving me more bewildered and horrified than ever. Letters to Georgia, in my handwriting. It was absurd, impossible, unless a faint memory stirred from months ago. Harold asking if he could borrow some of my personal stationery. The beautiful cream-colored paper with my monogram that Francis had given me years ago. For some important thank you notes, he had explained. I had given him an entire box without a second thought. And now, the sickening pieces were starting to fall into place. But one critical question remained. Why? Why would my oldest friend in the world go to such elaborate, cruel lengths to destroy me? I looked at the wrapped gift sitting on my coffee table. Inside was something Harold clearly never expected to see again. Something that, if revealed, had the power to change everything. It was time to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The next morning, I awoke with a newfound sense of resolve. I had spent another restless night piecing together fragments of conversations and strange occurrences from the past 6 months, and things were starting to make a terrible, gut-wrenching kind of sense. Harold's sudden, intense friendship with Evan Powell, the borrowed stationery, the abrupt cancellations of our planned lunches, the way he had begun to mention Georgia's late nights at her law firm with an increasing bitterness. I had been too absorbed in my own lingering grief over Francis's passing to notice how the patterns of our friendship were changing. But now, with the sharp clarity that comes from having nothing left to lose, I could see that whatever was happening had been building for months. I dressed carefully, choosing a simple blue suit, minimal grooming, and the pearl cufflinks Francis had given me for our 40th anniversary. I wanted to look composed and dignified. If I was going to confront Harold, I would not give him the satisfaction of seeing me broken. I didn't call ahead. I knew that if I had, he would have refused to see me. Instead, I took a taxi directly to his house, the elegant Tudor-style home in Westchester where I had spent countless holidays, birthday celebrations, and quiet evenings over the course of 5 decades. It was Georgia who answered the door, her face registering pure shock at the sight of me on her doorstep. "Arthur," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She glanced nervously back over her shoulder. "You shouldn't be here. I need to speak with Harold. He doesn't want to see you. Not after those letters." "Letters I never wrote," I cut in, meeting her gaze directly. "Letters someone else created using my stationery. Georgia, you know me. You've known me for 48 years. Do you honestly believe I would do something like that?" A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. For a brief moment, I thought I saw something else there too, perhaps guilt. But before she could respond, Harold appeared in the hallway behind her. "What is he doing here?" His voice was ice cold, but I detected something else simmering just beneath the anger. Fear. "Harold, we need to talk," I said, keeping my voice steady and calm. "Alone, I have nothing to say to you." He moved to close the door, but I took a step forward, blocking it. "I think you do, unless you'd prefer I share what I know with Georgia, right here and now." His face paled slightly. He exchanged a look with his wife, a look I couldn't quite interpret, before turning back to me. "Fine. 5 minutes. In the garden." He practically spat the words at me. Georgia retreated back inside while Harold led me around the side of the house to his prized rose garden. The October air was crisp, and the roses were mostly gone now, with only a few stubborn late blooms hanging on before the first frost of winter. We sat on the cold iron bench where we had spent so many warm summer evenings, talking about everything and nothing. Now, a heavy silence stretched between us, like a thick wall of ice. "Say what you came to say and then leave," Harold finally said, refusing to look at me. "I want to know why," I said simply. "Why would you destroy a 50-year friendship with such poisonous lies? Don't pretend you don't know what you did. I didn't write those letters, Harold, and we both know that." A flicker of something surprise perhaps crossed his face before he quickly masked it. "The handwriting was copied from my personal stationery. The stationery you borrowed from me 6 months ago." I leaned forward, my voice low. "What I don't understand is the why. Why would you go to the trouble of forging letters from me to your wife?" Harold's hands twisted nervously in his lap. "You've always been the perfect one, haven't you? Perfect Arthur, everyone's favorite, the devoted husband, the trusted friend, the community saint." The sheer bitterness in his voice took me aback. "Is that what this is about? Some kind of jealousy?" "Jealousy?" He laughed, a harsh, grating sound so unlike his usual melodic laugh. "You have no idea what's been happening in my life while you've been playing the part of the grieving widower. Then tell me." For a moment I thought he might. His face softened just slightly, and in that instant I caught a glimpse of the Harold I had known for so long, vulnerable and human. But then his expression hardened again, the mask of anger slamming back into place. "Time's up. You should go." I stood, knowing I wouldn't get through to him today. "Harold, whatever is happening, whatever has turned you against me so completely, it doesn't have to end our friendship. We've been through too much together. Some things can't be forgiven," he said quietly, his gaze fixed on a wilting rosebush. As I turned to leave, I paused. "The gift I brought to your party, I still have it." Something flickered in his eyes. Curiosity, perhaps even a hint of longing, but he quickly suppressed it. "I don't want anything from you. You might change your mind when you find out what at Island." I left him sitting there among the last roses of the season. A man I thought I knew better than anyone else in the world, now a stranger filled with dark secrets I couldn't begin to penetrate. I was halfway down the long driveway when a voice called my name. I turned to see Georgia hurrying after me, glancing nervously back toward the house. "Arthur, wait." She caught up to me, slightly out of breath, her face drawn and worried. "Those letters," she said quietly. "I knew they couldn't be from you. The things they said, it wasn't your voice, your words." But Harold was so convinced. "Who do you think wrote them?" She hesitated. "I have my suspicions. Evan Powell has been very involved in our lives lately." "Evan? But why would he?" "Look into his background," Georgia said, her voice urgent. "I don't think he's who he claims to be. And Arthur," she stopped, seeming to struggle with what to say next. "Harold is not well. He hasn't been for some time." Before I could ask what she meant, the front door of the house opened. Georgia squeezed my arm once, a silent plea, then hurried back toward the house. I walked away with more questions than answers, but one thing was becoming terrifyingly clear. The truth about Harold, Evan, and the fabricated betrayal was far more complex and sinister than I had ever imagined. And my unopened gift now seemed more important than ever. George's warning about Evan Powell gnawed at me. Who was this man who had seemingly appeared from nowhere and driven a wedge between me and my oldest friend? After another sleepless night, I made a decision. I called my nephew Thomas, who worked in cybersecurity. If anyone could dig up information on a man named Evan Powell, it would be him. "Uncle Arthur, this isn't like you," Thomas said when I explained what I needed. "Are you sure about this?" "I wouldn't ask if it wasn't critically important," I replied. "Something isn't right about this man." 2 days later, Thomas called back, his voice grave. "You were right to be suspicious. Evan Powell isn't his real name. It's Ethan Pritchard, and he's changed his identity at least 3 times that I can find. But why would he target Harold? Why target me? That's the interesting part. He has a pattern. He finds wealthy older men, befriends them, systematically isolates them from their existing support networks, and then, well, things tend to go missing. Jewelry, money, valuables. My blood ran cold. He's a con artist. A sophisticated one, Thomas confirmed. And he's never been caught because his victims are always too embarrassed to report being duped. As Thomas shared more details, the pieces of the puzzle clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Evan had been positioning himself to gain Harold's complete trust, while methodically eliminating anyone who might see through his facade. And I, as Harold's oldest and closest friend, would have been his biggest obstacle. "There's one more thing," Thomas added hesitantly. "I found some medication records. Harold has been filling prescriptions for anxiety and confusion, very high doses." My heart sank. George's words echoed in my mind. Harold is not well. After thanking Thomas, I sat with this new, terrifying information, trying to process what it all meant. Was Harold being manipulated by Evan while in a vulnerable mental state? Was Evan feeding his paranoia? Perhaps even drugging him beyond his prescribed medication? I knew I needed to act, but I had to be careful. A direct confrontation with Evan would likely backfire, making me appear unhinged and vindictive, exactly the way he had painted me. Instead, I made another call, this time to Christopher. "I know you don't want to talk to me," I said the moment he answered. "But before you hang up, I have information about Evan Powell that might explain what's happening with your father." To my profound relief, Christopher didn't immediately disconnect. "What information?" I shared everything Thomas had discovered, keeping my explanation focused on the cold, hard facts rather than accusations. That's hard to believe," Christopher said when I had finished, but his voice lacked conviction. "Have things gone missing from your father's house? Has his behavior changed significantly since Evan arrived on the scene?" There was a long pause on the line. "Dad's emerald cufflinks, the anniversary gift Mom gave him. They disappeared last month," he accused the housekeeper. Another pause, "and he has been forgetful, confused. Mom's been worried. Christopher, I would never hurt your father. In 50 years, have I ever given you a single reason to think I would?" "No," he admitted softly. "But the letters were forged. Evan is isolating your father from everyone who truly cares about him. What should we do?" "We need to help your father see the truth, but we have to do it gently. His 70th birthday present, the one I never gave him, it might be the key." Later that day, Christopher met me at my apartment. He looked exhausted, the strain of the situation evident in the dark circles under his eyes. I invited him in and offered him a cup of tea, which he accepted with a distracted nod. His eyes landed on the still-wrapped gift sitting on my coffee table. "Is that it? The present?" I nodded. "Before I show you, I need you to understand something. Your father and I have shared 50 years of friendship. This gift represents that history, the real history, not the false narrative Evan has so carefully created." Carefully, I unwrapped the silver paper, revealing what I had spent months creating. It wasn't just a photo album or a scrapbook, as one might expect. It was a beautiful, hand-bound journal containing letters, dozens of them, that Harold had written to me over the years. After your mother's heart scare last year, your father gave me these for safekeeping, I explained, opening the journal. He said that if anything ever happened to him, these were the words he would want to be remembered by. Christopher's hand trembled as he took the journal from me. Inside were letters chronicling 50 years of our friendship, from teenage confidences and midlife crises to quiet reflections on aging. Harold's elegant, familiar handwriting filled page after page with expressions of unwavering trust, deep love, and profound gratitude for our friendship. He wrote this one just 6 months ago, I said, turning to one of the final entries. Christopher read it aloud. Arthur, my dearest friend, what would I ever do without you? You are the keeper of my secrets, the witness to my life. If I forget all else, remind me of who we have been to each other. Tears filled Christopher's eyes. It's like he knew, like he somehow anticipated that he would start forgetting. I think a part of him did know that something was wrong, I said gently. That's why he entrusted me with these letters. But then Evan arrived. Christopher closed the journal, a new and steely determination in his eyes. We need to show this to Dad, now. Are you sure? In his current state? If he's being manipulated, every day we wait is another day that man has to isolate him further. Christopher stood up. Mom is taking Evan to some charity luncheon this afternoon. Dad will be alone. I hesitated for a moment, then nodded. The journal represented the undeniable truth of our friendship, a truth that might be powerful enough to break through whatever fog of confusion Evan had created in Harold's mind. As we gathered our things to leave, I felt a strange mixture of hope and trepidation. Would Harold recognize the truth when he was confronted with it? Or had Evan's poison spread too deep? There was only one way to find out. Christopher drove us to Harold's house in a tense, heavy silence, the journal of letters held securely in my lap. My hands trembled slightly as I held it, knowing exactly what was at stake. This wasn't just about clearing my name anymore. This was about saving my oldest friend from someone who meant to do him serious harm. The house looked different somehow as we approached, quieter, more vulnerable. Christopher used his key to let us in. "Dad," he called out, "it's me. I've brought Arthur." We found Harold in the sunroom, sitting in his favorite wicker chair, staring blankly out at the garden. He turned as we entered, his face registering first confusion, then a flash of anger. "What is he doing here? Christopher, how could you bring him into my home after what he did?" Christopher knelt beside his father's chair. "Dad, please, just listen. There are things you need to know about Evan." "Evan is the only true friend I have left," Harold declared. But there was a flicker of uncertainty in his voice. "No," I said quietly, stepping forward. "He's not who you think he island. And I suppose you're going to tell me who he really is?" Harold's sarcasm couldn't quite mask the tremor in his voice. "His real name is Ethan Pritchard," I said gently. "He's changed his identity multiple times. He targets men like you, intelligent, wealthy, trusted in their communities. He isolates them from their friends and family, and then he steals from them." Harold's face paled slightly, but he shook his head in denial. "That's absurd. You're just jealous of our friendship." "Dad," Christopher interjected, "the emerald cufflinks Mom gave you, the ones you thought the housekeeper took, did they disappear after Evan started visiting regularly?" A flicker of doubt crossed Harold's face. That's just a coincidence." "And those letters you found," I continued carefully, "the ones supposedly from me to Georgia, did you actually see me write them, or did Evan conveniently discover them?" Harold's hands clutched the arms of his chair. He was helping me organize my desk. He found them in George's drawer. "Harold," I said softly, "I have never written your wife a letter in my life. You know that." His eyes met mine, and for a brief moment I saw the raw confusion there, the fog of a man trying desperately to reconcile two contradictory truths. I placed the journal in his lap. "This is what I brought for your birthday. Your letters to me spanning 50 years. You gave them to me for safekeeping last year, remember? After Georgia's health scare." Harold stared down at the journal, not opening it. I don't remember doing that." "Open it," Christopher urged. "Read what you wrote." With shaking hands, Harold opened the journal. His own handwriting stared back at him, decades of his own thoughts, feelings, and memories, all chronicled in his elegant script. He turned the pages slowly, reading fragments of his own past. "Arthur stayed with me all night when Christopher was born," he read aloud. "He held my hand through 17 hours of labor." He looked up at me, confusion clouding his eyes. "I remember that. You brought ice chips and told terrible jokes to distract me. Keep reading," I encouraged gently. He turned more pages. "Francis's funeral today. I don't know how Arthur remained standing. 52 years of marriage ended. He says I'm holding him up, but the truth is, he's always been the strong one." Harold's voice broke. "I wrote this. These are my words." "Yes," I said softly. "Your words, your memories, our friendship." Harold continued reading, tears now streaming down his face. With each page he turned, I could see the light of recognition returning to his eyes, not just of the events described, but of his own self, his own true voice. "I've been so confused," he finally admitted, looking up from the journal. "Things just haven't felt right. Evan's been giving me these new pills for my anxiety." Christopher took his father's hand. "We think he's been medicating you, Dad, making you paranoid and confused." As if summoned by the mention of his name, we heard the front door open. A moment later, Evan appeared in the doorway of the sunroom, elegantly dressed from the charity luncheon. "Harold, darling, He stopped short, seeing Christopher and me. His composed expression faltered for just a second before he recovered his composure. "What's going on here? I thought we agreed Arthur wasn't welcome here anymore." "Hello, Ethan," I said calmly, watching his face. The color drained from his cheeks. "My name is Evan. Harold, these people are upsetting you. They should leave." Harold looked down at the journal in his hands, then back up at Evan. Something fundamental had shifted in his expression. The fog had lifted, clarity was returning. "No," Harold said firmly, "you should leave." "Don't be ridiculous," Evan laughed nervously. "You're just confused again. You need your medication." "What I need," Harold said, rising to his feet with a newfound strength, "is for you to get out of my house and out of my life." Evan's facade finally cracked. "After everything I've done for you, that man," he pointed a trembling finger at me, "doesn't care about you like I do." 50 years, Harold said quietly, his voice resonating with conviction. "Arthur has stood by me for 50 years. You've known me for 6 months, and in that time you've tried to steal my cufflinks and my sanity." "Georgia!" Evan called out desperately. "Tell them." But Georgia appeared in the doorway behind him, holding Christopher's phone in her hand. "The police are on their way, Ethan. Or should I say Charles Wilson from Tampa. Or maybe Edward Price from Chicago." Evan's face contorted with a silent rage. He looked from Georgia to Harold to me, realizing his game was up. Without another word, he grabbed his coat and fled. The police caught him before he reached the end of the street. Later that evening, Sitting in Harold's kitchen, just as we had thousands of times before, we began the slow process of healing. The doctor Christopher had called, confirmed that Harold had been severely overmedicated, likely with additional drugs. Evan had been secretly slipping into his food or drinks. "I said such terrible things to you," Harold whispered, holding my hand across the familiar wooden table. "At the party, in that email, I can't believe I ever thought you would betray me." "It wasn't you," I assured him. "It was the medication and Evan's manipulation. But how can you forgive me so easily?" I squeezed his hand. "Because that's what friends do. Real friends." Harold smiled, his eyes still wet with tears. 50 years, and many more to come, I promised. Our friendship, tested by the cruelest deception imaginable, had not only survived, but had emerged stronger than ever. The gift I had brought to his birthday, the journal filled with his own words, had saved not just our friendship, but perhaps Harold himself. Some bonds, I realized, are simply unbreakable. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.